What Really Happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show. It is Friday, October 19th, 2018. Thank goodness it's Friday. Thank goodness it's Friday. Thank goodness it's Friday. And we've got a lot of stuff to talk about today. Hour number 3, the lovely Lady Claire will be joining us. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, ready to answer the phone, put you on the air with your comments, questions, and opinions. So let's get right on into it. Obviously, the big story right now, and maybe it's the big story because we're being distracted from Yemen and Syria and Afghanistan and all the other things that are going on out there. But it continues to focus on the death of Khashoggi. And Trump has now basically flipped yet again, saying it certainly looks like Khashoggi is dead. The consequences will be severe. And now Great Britain has waded on into this, saying that the evidence suggests the Crown Prince ordered Khashoggi killing. This is from a former head of MI6. Now, people are asking, who would benefit? Who benefits from the Khashoggi assassination? Well, Khashoggi had a lot of people who were concerned about him. He was an avowed champion of the Palestinian cause. Of course, he would be considered an enemy of Israel. Khashoggi was writing exposés on KSA, and especially about the naked tyranny of Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. So he was a feared opponent of Riyadh. Now, Khashoggi was a deep intelligence insider. We had guessed that correctly. Direct ties to the CIA. He's a known contractor, Mossad, MI6, and the Saudi General Intelligence Directorate, which meant he had all these state secrets and was being perceived as a loose cannon. Now, Khashoggi was closely associated with Prince Turki, who was the director of the Makhbarat, the Saudi state intelligence apparatus, and it's quite likely that whatever Prince Turki knew about Saudi Arabia's involvement in 9/11, so did Khashoggi. And it may be that the Saudi Arabia government did not trust him to keep that secret much longer. And Khashoggi was becoming more and more unpredictable after the arrest and detention of so many Saudi Arabian princes, generals, and VIPs by the Crown Prince. He was known as the one progressive journalist and covert intelligence operative who could be counted on to plead their case in the court of public opinion, which he did. When we were getting all the reporting about how all these VIPs had been rounded up and literally held for ransom by Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, a lot of that came from Khashoggi. And apparently he was also very concerned about the extreme rightward shift into Wahhabism that was being advocated by Mohammed bin Salman under the shield, the claim of liberalizing Saudi Arabia's image. And he knew well that Mohammed bin Salman would say one thing, but then act in the opposite manner. The savage war on Yemen, the siege of Qatar, again, back to the mass arrests, the uptick in beheadings, and so forth. So there's a lot of different reasons and a lot of different people who would want him dead. But given that Khashoggi was done inside the consulate, it's too obvious and heavy-handed. And I think the real agenda here was to, first of all, get rid of an inconvenient individual, but use that to also get rid of Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. And there's more and more indications that that is, in fact, what's going on. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has told Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman that as first in line to the throne, that the responsibility for the disappearance of Jamal Khashoggi has to be his. And even if you're blameless, the blame falls on you. Shades of Kavanaugh here. The French daily Le Figaro published a story that reports the Saudi royal family is actively considering a replacement to Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. And so there it is. Now, another story that came out a few days ago, 7 of the 15 men suspected of being involved in this operation to kill Jamal Khashoggi belonged to Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman's personal security and protection detail. Now, maybe they were sent there by the Saudi family to lay another trail of evidence to make it look like Mohammed bin Salman. I mean, if Mohammed bin Salman did this himself, if he really gave this order, why do it in the consulate? I mean, look at the backlash that this has provoked. And now, Mohammed bin Salman is many things. Claire calls him the butcher of Yemen. I don't think he's stupid. There's something that just doesn't fit right. I think he's being framed. I think the Saudi government decided to get rid of Khashoggi because he was an annoyance and a threat and a danger, and then used that to put pressure on Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman to step down. So we're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. And another reason I think this is a deliberate operation is just how much media attention has been given to this story. Journalists get killed around the world on a daily basis. Look how many journalists Israel has killed down in Gaza. The corporate media doesn't even bat an eye. But on this one, big top story day after day after day after day. It's being made into an issue for a political reason. Now, questions are continuing to swirl around this alleged audio recording that Turkey says they have of the actual torture and assassination taking place inside the Saudi consulate in Istanbul. And it turns out claims that copies have been sent to the United States were fake news. Turkey's foreign minister announced earlier today saying, no, nobody has gotten copies of the tape, just take our word for it. Which I'm not really ready to do. I was listening on the radio, the car radio this morning. Claire and I had to do some shopping, and they were talking about this story about how investigators were now going into the Saudi consulate in Istanbul to run DNA tests to see if they could find DNA for Khashoggi. And my first reaction is, that's completely and utterly pointless. We know the man was in there. It was caught on video. So, another interesting aspect of the story that has a lot of people concerned is, of course, the resignation and departure of the Saudi consul, who, as the man in charge of the consulate, would certainly have been responsible and certainly aware of what was going on underneath his roof. So he would be a valuable witness. But now he's gone. And nobody's really sure where he is. Over at MiddleEastEye.net, they're pointing out this incredible selective outrage in the Western media. And again, pointing out that all of this outrage and this chest thumping and this threats that we're going to do something, there will be consequences, stands in stark contrast to the silence and active support of Saudi Arabia's bloody war in Yemen. And I'm not diminishing the death of Khashoggi. If he was tortured and murdered inside the consulate, it is outrageous behavior. But so is what's going on down in Yemen. Okay. Meanwhile, back here in the United States of America, the rhetoric is advancing. Lindsey Graham was out there saying we need to sanction Saudi Arabia until Crown Prince Mohammed bin Solomon steps down. U.S. senators are demanding President Trump impose tough sanctions on Saudi Arabia just because they are an ally in an important mission, which is containing Iranian expansion in the region. We cannot be allowed to overlook or walk away from this horrible crime. It undermines our ability to stand for morality and human rights all over the world. Boy, oh boy, oh boy. Talk about 6 Pinocchios on that one. Morality and human rights all over the world? I'm surprised these senators didn't spontaneously combust right there. Drop down to the dark regions. The United States is not a moral nation. They're not protecting human rights around the world. They're one of the biggest violators of human rights. Oh, man, the bovine excrement is at flood stage. Now, as it turns out, the last column Khashoggi wrote was criticizing the crackdown on the free media by much of the Arab governments. That over in the Middle East, the Arab governments are silencing the media, not just the independent media, all media. All media are being silenced. Apparently, in December of 2016, just after Donald Trump won the election, Jamal Khashoggi wrote a column criticizing Trump, and Al Hayat newspaper, which published a weekly column by him, refused to run it. He had been with them every Saturday for 5 years. That one Saturday, they did not run it. So, meanwhile, we have this other Saudi prince Khalid bin Abdullah Al Saud, has called for another military campaign against Kuwait. And it's, why are all these people so in love with war? So Al Saud wrote on Twitter, Kuwait needs a new Operation Decisive Storm to purge it from the dirt of the Muslim Brotherhood and the supporters of Hamad's, which is the Qatari ruling family here. All right, let's turn on down to Syria, see what's going on down there. Full withdrawal of the U.S.-supported terrorists was to be completed by October 15th. The deadline has been missed because al-Nusra and allied jihadists refused to disarm and leave, likely at the behest of Washington, D.C., which really didn't want the demilitarized zone or deconflictized zone in the first place. They're still trying to find a way that they can justify going after Assad. So the designated buffer zone plan seems to be falling apart. And apparently these jihadists in Idlib continue attacking government forces and civilians. They're strengthening their positions, digging new trenches, and expanding their network of underground tunnels. In other words, they're getting ready to continue the fight. So, apparently, according to the Arabic language Baladi News, French forces are getting ready to set up a military base in Raqqa. Apparently, they have been invited in by the United States, which is kind of like breaking into your neighbor's home and then inviting some of your friends to come on over for a cold one. But according to the report, U.S. military troops are in talks with the SDF, the Syrian Democratic Forces, to further equip Al-Tabaka Air Base in western Raqqa and turn it into their new military base in the region next year. And the French army has sent weapons, military equipment, and forces to Raqqa. Now, I've belabored this point before, and you're about to get it again. The United States does not have permission to be in Syria from the Syrian government. Syria has not invited them, or for that matter, the French, to be there. There is no United Nations Security Council resolution authorizing the United States to be in Syria. Congress has not passed a declaration of war authorizing the United States to be in Syria. So, if you want to know who the aggressors are here, it's really, really very obvious. Okay, as Nikki Haley winds up her stint after 2 years as U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, the media is trying to puff up her image and saying that she's made the post of UN Ambassador more glamorous than her predecessors. I have no idea what that is supposed to mean. And apparently this description came from Donald Trump himself. So we know that during her stint, Haley has further diminished the reputation of the United States of America, making us more isolated in the world's most vital international political body. And in her own words, Haley concluded her mission at the UN was accomplished because she was a strong defender of Israel against United Nations bias. That's funny. I thought she was supposed to be working for the United States. Okay. Little story. This is a flashback from Counterpunch. And it's saying, who's responsible for the tragic treatment of Palestinians? And then it concludes that Israel could not possibly continue to commit these war crimes without automatic, unqualified U.S. government support year after year after year. Pro-Israel lobby pressure controls all the major corporate news media, and sadly it's starting to control some of the independent media. Congress behaves like a committee of the Israeli parliament. No president since Eisenhower has had the courage to stand up to Israeli wrongdoing. I take exception to that. You know, Kennedy was definitely opposed to them getting nuclear weapons. And those who know the truth about what Israel is doing are afraid to speak out for fear of losing their careers, losing their jobs, being tagged by that canary mission, which means you're wasting your money. I mean, it's just smear tactics. It's McCarthyism all over. But the end result of all of this is that, yes, in point of fact, the United States government is complicit in all of these crimes committed by Israel. And more people, more and more ordinary Americans are saying, it's time to stop pandering to Israel. And yes, the politicians and the corporate media prostitutes and correspondents, they're totally taken over. They think it's far more important to be friends with Israel than to support actual American interests. And we really do need people in the government who are willing to stand up and take this government back from foreign puppet rule. Meanwhile, up at the International Criminal Court in The Hague, they have sent their sternest warning yet to Israel regarding the Khan al-Ahmar dispute and the fighting with Hamas. And Chief Prosecutor Fatou Bensouda issued an unprecedented statement saying he's been following the planned eviction of the Bedouin community of Khan al-Ahmar in the West Bank. Evacuation by force now appears imminent, and with it the prospects for further escalation and violence. It bears recalling, as a general matter, that extensive destruction of property without military necessity and population transfers in an occupied territory do constitute war crimes under the Rome Statute. So the ICC is making noises that they may hold Israeli officials to account. And thankfully, the United States does not have a veto over the International Criminal Court. Okay, we're going to take a break here for some commercials. We'll be back with more news after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And yes, Khashoggi remains the top story. We're being conditized. And apparently, Turkish authorities are now saying that they're searching a particular area of the forest outside Istanbul where they suspect, pardon me, Khashoggi's body has been disposed of. So, again, I don't know who did this, but I think Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman has been set up. They want to get rid of him without going through the mess of having an assassination here. All right, getting on back down to Israel and Palestine. Donald Trump keeps talking about his deal of the century between Israel and Palestine. The full details still have not been made available, but certainly Israel is starting to implement what they see as their side of the deal, entrenching apartheid rule over Palestinians. And meanwhile, Trump is basically dragging its heels on publishing the deal. Netanyahu is deepening his hold on the West Bank and East Jerusalem, and he knows that Trump is not going to stand in his way. Trump's deal of the century is Netanyahu gets everything that he wants. What we do know about the deal is that the Palestinians are expected to surrender their right of return. And that's a non-starter. So, and not too surprisingly, this last year has set a record for the number of homes demolished by Israel in East Jerusalem and the West Bank. And in many cases, they'll force the families to demolish their own homes to save a few bucks, because those bulldozers take a lot of gasoline. All of a sudden, Vladimir Putin is changing his tone. Last several years, he was been the voice of calm and serene, and just everybody calm down, and he's been a statesman. But apparently at the Valdai Forum in Sochi, he started ramping up the rhetoric, talking about the enemies of Russia, about how Russia is fearless. The people of Russia are fearless and ready to fight for their country. And basically addressed the Crimea issue again. Said, Crimea is ours, we're not going anywhere. And why is it ours? It's not because we came and grabbed. And he basically reiterated the story about the referendums, which has actually went down. But the U.S. refuses to recognize the referendums, and so by default, Russia stole Crimea. And as I pointed out before, that's like a guest at a wedding refusing to recognize the bride's right to marry that particular groom. Therefore, by default, the groom has kidnapped and raped the bride. That's the way people in government tend to think here. Putin also issued some advice, I guess we could call it wise, not to emulate Georgia's Saakashvili. And it's a reference to when Saakashvili attacked the self-proclaimed Republic of South Ossetia back in 2008, which went very, very badly for Saakashvili. He wound up losing vast territories. And so Putin is telling Poroshenko, be very careful about trying to invade the eastern Ukrainian republics. Be very careful about especially trying to invade Crimea, because you may actually wind up with less than what you have right now. Over in Korea, finally a little bit of good news. South Korea and the U.S. have canceled another major military exercise this year. And they said they're doing it because they want to make more diplomatic progress with North Korea. Now, it's unclear whether the decision to suspend this exercise came from the United States or, and this is more likely, Moon Jae-in, who is clearly working on the diplomatic angle and clearly thinking that reunification is possible here. Interesting little story. This came out of Information Clearinghouse. If you want to make America great again, start by making America free again. And this is basically talking about the First Amendment and how it is constantly under attack, both by the government and private industry. And you can't have a free nation if you don't have freedom of speech. It really does come down to that. If that's taken away from us, then we're no longer the land of the free. We're the land of the slave, home of the surveilled. All right, we got to take another break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And this is a bit of an alarming story. Apparently, John Bolton is pushing Donald Trump to leave the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty with Russia. And Bolton is using as the excuse the accusation, still undocumented, that Russia is producing a intermediate range ground launch nuclear capable cruise missile at this factory inside Russia, the one where there was actually talk of just going on in and blowing it up. Now, the United States has already been in violation of the treaty itself. So we have another case of the pot calling the kettle black. But if Trump walks out of this treaty, then, you know, everybody starts making these missiles. And the world becomes a much more dangerous place here. Now, let's talk about the 7th Fleet. It's over here in the Pacific. West of us, it's over by Japan. It's home ported in Japan. And they have had a really rough time of it. They now have a reputation of being the most disaster-prone fleet in the U.S. military. And the most recent incident involves an MH-60 Seahawk helicopter crashed on the flight deck of the USS Ronald Reagan shortly after takeoff. And apparently the personnel on board are in stable condition. None of the injuries are life-threatening, but some of the servicemen were evacuated ashore. And this is the second incident involving helicopters to hit the U.S. Navy this month. Earlier, 2 HH-60H Seahawks crashed into each other while taxiing at Kadena Air Force Base in Japan. Nobody was injured. So, again, this is not helping the reputation of the 7th Fleet. Because remember back in June 2017, the guided missile destroyer USS Fitzgerald collided with a Philippine container ship near Tokyo, which killed 7 of the destroyer's crew members. 2 months later, 10 sailors were killed on board the guided missile cruiser USS John McCain when it collided with a merchant vessel off of Singapore. And then in November of that year, a C-2A Greyhound transport plane carrying 11 people crashed near Okinawa. 8 people on board were rescued. Our military is not in good shape. And don't forget the Fat Leonard scandal. That involved a lot of the people from the 7th Fleet. I think something like 60 admirals. Got a lot of admirals over there. All right, let's talk about our domestic politics here. There's a story that's breaking that has a lot of people very much up in arms. There's a lawsuit that's been filed. It was discovered that Democrats have been asking non-citizens to register. And apparently they have been mailing out applications to register to vote with the citizenship box pre-marked yes. And district attorneys and the Justice Department were notified about these applications by the Public Interest Legal Foundation. And the group also provided a signed affidavit from one individual who said a number of people who are non-citizens received the mailing. Now, if you think about it, this is the Democrats allowing foreign interference in a United States election. Because all these illegal immigrants, they are technically foreigners. After all that screaming about Trump and Russia and foreign interference, and here are the Democrats, yeah, pretend you're a citizen, vote for me. Pretend you're a citizen, vote for me. So there is a lawsuit. And this, if you thought 2016 was a crooked election, this next one is just going to be worse. And the Democrats are desperate. They are just getting so desperate out there. Elle Magazine, or LA Magazine, apparently had an issue with their tweet that they sent on out with fake news. And the tweet said, Kanye Kim split up. And so everybody's going to want to click that, and it took them to a voter registration site. And I understand the Democrats want to get a lot of people registered to vote, but you know something? Just because they're registered doesn't mean they're going to be motivated to go on out on election day. And right now we know that the GOP base is energized because of what happened to Kavanaugh, and the Democratic base is kind of, they're not really enthusiastic. They're not showing up at the Democratic rallies in huge numbers. I think they're turned off by some of the more extreme elements of the Democratic Party, the hard left party. So again, we're 18 days away from the midterm elections. Both sides are predicting landslide victories, but my gut is telling me that the Democrats may be in for a nasty surprise. Over at the White House, reports are coming on out that apparently John Bolton and John Kelly got into a profanity-filled shouting match just outside of the Oval Office. And this happened yesterday, actually. And the fight was so bad that a lot of the White House staff wondered if one of the two men might immediately resign. That did not happen. Pardon me. But apparently there's a lot of stress and tension inside the White House, and apparently Chief of Staff John Kelly and John Bolton do not like each other. I wish Bolton would resign. He's a threat to life on Earth. I want to get back to this issue of civility in our public discourse, because we're quickly becoming uncivil, and police are in New York are searching for a man who just started screaming white people are the devils in a pizzeria and then punched this 60-year-old white guy in the face so hard he needed eye surgery. And yeah, it's like whites are becoming targets again, just like South Africa, just like Zimbabwe, just like Namibia. White heterosexual males are becoming an endangered species on college campuses. They're terrified to be any place where some woman could say, oh, he assaulted me. On some college campuses, the accusation alone is enough to get you kicked out of school. No proof required. No proof whatsoever. It's really out of control here. Let me check something here real quick. Oh, we do have callers on the line. I'm sorry, my Twitch screen froze. Let's go to Dave in Missouri. Aloha, Dave. I'm sorry I made you wait so long. What's on your mind?
No, dude, I mean, you went through so much so fast just now. So Bolton and Kelly, what a joke. I mean, wouldn't you have loved to have been a fly on the wall? I mean, come on. That's gorgeous. Bolton's got to go. This whole neocon thing has got to go. Oh, let me back up. Hi, Mike. Hello, Claire. Amy and I send you our love. RBN listeners, we love you. I started out with a different topic, but you went through so much news that my head kind of spun. And so
so
it did.
If it'll make you feel
better. I want to come back. It does. It does. It's so fast. But I want to come back to Putin, because, you know, he's been the only statesman really in our generation who has actually shown to be a man of his people. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. I mean, show me somebody else. But, you know, Putin has stood in the face of all this, all the Western diatribe and just persecution. I mean, this has been ridiculous, and he has stood strong for the Russian people. Now, Amy is half Ukrainian, half Lithuanian.
Okay.
You know, she is first generation American. Her folks came here. Actually, it's a weird story, but Hitler saved her family from Stalin. If you didn't die when Hitler was invading you, Stalin killed you on the way out. and Hitler actually did save hundreds of thousands of Poles, Czechs, Latvians, Romanians, blah blah. He really did, and he got them to the Western Allies, and they had a choice. Her mom and dad, Amy's mom and dad, my wife, dear precious lady, Australia or America. They came to America, and ultimately, didn't speak the language, raised 6 children, have a 1,000-acre farm here in Texas County. They're 98 and 94. Amy, I've had to give up my wife because it was either a nurse or somebody, and Amy's the baby, so I gave up Amy for the moment to take care of the olds, to keep them in their farm, but it's an only American thing, and this is, well, maybe it's not only American, Mike.
No,
you could tell me that.
No, it's not just an American thing. I mean, in the age where I was growing up, it was very common for intergenerational care. Care for the elderly wasn't just automatically shopped out to an old folks' home. That kind of is more of a recent trend.
Well, that's not what I was really. That's not what I was really referring to. But to come to a foreign country, not speaking the language, and over 60 years of work, being able to produce, being able to provide a 1,000-acre farm for the generations to come. Now that's kind of weird. I don't know where else you're going to do that.
Well,
right?
That's a great success story.
But the dude planted trees. Mom, she worked at the school. This wasn't that hard to do. And so this is really what I wanted to talk to you about. From rural Missouri standpoint, on this whole confusing, never-ending diatribe of just garbage that comes through television. Most of it all leftist. All just turned against our future, against our past, against our present. So from a rural point of view, so we just opened up a brand new barber shop here in Licking, Missouri. Now, Licking is a town of about 1,200 people. It has no economic base, but everybody here is like grandfathered in, This is old school America. These people are farmers. They're awake before the cock can crow. They work till after sundown when they can't. They produce their own vegetables. They make their own meat. We all have cattle. Now this is lost too much. This is how we all come about, right? Where you had a garden, where you had a farm, where yes, this is how it all come. You had chickens, you had beef. This is how it all comes. And you had the best beef.
We were self-sufficient.
Yes.
Now we're dealing.
You had a well
with a government whose official policy is to keep us dependent on government-provided services, on government-provided food, on corporations, because dependency
on GMO produce, fluorified water. I get it. I understand, but I'm in a place where that still doesn't happen. There is still places in this world where people do take care of themselves, their families, their children. They get up before daylight. They work till after dawn. They provide their own meat. They grow their own vegetables. This still happens. And excuse me, I have to cough.
Yeah, mostly in the heartland, not along the coast so much, but definitely, in the middle of the country.
No, you can't get anywhere near the city.
Dave, I need you to wrap up because I got another caller who's been waiting a very, very long time I need to get to.
Okay, one last point. Folks, if you don't take care of your children, no one will. The government is not your nanny. and is not going to take care of you. They don't take care. They don't care for you. Please support RBN. Please support Mike. Amy and I love you and Claire. You know that. Folks, you've got to be. If you're a man, you got to be a man. If you're a woman, you need to be. If you're a mother, be a mother. Be a partner. Do something. Do not depend on this government. You cannot trust it. It will not fulfill your needs. You will be failed. The only way you're going to make it through this, because we got tough times ahead, only way you're going to make it through it is to roll your sleeves up and learn how your grandpa did it. And I'll let you go with that. Peace out, right, Mike. I love you, and I love RBN.
Well, thank you very much for that. We're going to switch over to Don in Iowa. Don, thank you for waiting patiently. I'm probably going to have to take you through the commercial break, but let's get started. What's on your mind today?
Hello, Mike. Can you hear me?
Hello.
Hello. Yeah. I wanted to say a few words about Elizabeth Warren. You were talking about her yesterday, but
yes.
When I knew that,
or Sacagawea.
Yeah, I could tell. Originally, I could tell she was a big phony when Bernie was running against Hillary, right? And
yep,
they were waiting on Elizabeth Warren to decide what's she going to do. She was on the fence. All she had to do was say, "I'm for Bernie," and that would essentially, she would have been a kingmaker right there. You know, I mean that would, but she wasn't going to go against the power structure there, even though she was ostensibly trying to purport to be some kind of a breath of fresh air in the Democratic Party, or somebody that a little thinking outside the box or something like that. I don't know what she was trying to do, but you could tell right away that she was a phony when she would not come out for Bernie. She could have done it. And,
yeah, she could have, but I mean, she's certainly, outed as a phony now. This is going to haunt her for the rest of her political career. She's dug herself into a big hole, and unfortunately, she keeps trying to dig deeper. And I think her chances at 2020 just went out the window. Anyway, listen, Don, do you have anything else?
Yeah, I have a little bit more.
All right, then stay on the line. I'll come right back to you after these commercials. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. The phone lines are loading up here, and we're still talking with Don in Iowa. And Don, what else have you got on your mind?
Yeah, a couple more points. For one thing, Elizabeth Warren grew up in the middle of Oklahoma. A lot of people down there are Indian. They know exactly what tribe they're from, where they're from, and all this. None of this stuff. Basically, it's none of this stuff. Your grandmother said you have high cheekbones, and you probably part Indian and stuff. And I happened to see one of these snippets on TV where they're trying to defend her. And some guy was saying she's not an Indian, she's less than 1,000th Indian. And so the lady came back and tried to defend Elizabeth Warren. She says, she should not listen to her mother, who told her she was an Indian. So then if you're trying to go ahead and expose Liz Warden as a fraud, you're against motherhood now, so you're against all motherhood.
Boy, that's a bit of a reach.
That was a pretty good tactic, I admit. But on this Project Veritas, the thing about that is, this guy, O'Keefe, no, he doesn't break the law. He knows exactly what he's doing. He stays within the law. And he'll catch these workers when they're half drunk or something. But the thing about it is, these workers work to vent. They know they have a horrible job. They have to work for, no, they don't really do it. They do it for a paycheck. And they have to tell somebody about what a bunch of garbage it is. They're basically disgruntled workers, and that's why they admit this stuff to Project Veritas. Okay, I'll let you go now, Mike. Thanks.
All right, thanks an awful lot here, and we're going to switch over to Ken in Fort Worth. Aloha, Ken. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Donald Trump said somebody told him he ought to suggest that he ought to apologize to Pocahontas. He says, yeah, the real one.
Yeah, maybe. And yeah, there's no apology. There's no apology warranted here by Donald Trump.
You know what Trump ought to do is get himself a nice big table, draw a line down the middle, and she can sit on one side with her donkey, and he can sit on the side with his elephant, just like over North Korea, and he can write out a check for the same percentage to him that she was. That's only fair.
Yeah, I mean, supposedly Elizabeth Warren was demanding $1 million for charity. Well, if she's only 1/1000th Native American ancestry, then Trump's check is only for $1,000. I'm sure he's greatly relieved.
Right. Also, the New American Magazine has a Freedom Index, and some time ago, Cruz got 98, something 95, something like that, and Warren got 0.
Yeah.
Does that give you an idea? Does that give you an idea how bad she is?
Well, it's amazing that there are so many of these politicians that everybody knows they're bad, and yet somehow they keep getting reelected.
Yeah. You'd think they would kick out Pelosi and Frankenstein, wouldn't you?
Absolutely. Anyway, Ken, do you have anything
I'm
more?
gone.
Do you want me to hold you over the break? Okay, we're going to take a break for station identification. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, and we're going to, this is hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. We're going to go right back to the phones to Frank in London. Aloha, Frank. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. I just wanted to ask, is the Democrats, do they have some kind of mission to commit political suicide? Because you have these two idiots. One wants to investigate the investigator because she was exposed, and the other lady who claims she was American Indian, and she's still sticking to it. It's almost unbelievable. These people realize that the world right now is looking at American politics as some kind of a sitcom.
Yes.
It's just crazy. I mean, okay, forget what comes out of Donald Trump's mouth sometimes, but the Dems, there seems to be 10 times worse. People shouting, screaming. There's no logic in what they're saying, advocating and encouraging violence. It's a joke, and you have these people blatantly lying, and you have this other one, a New Jersey senator who was, I think he was indicted for having sex with minors in the Republic of Dominican Republic or something like that. I mean, it's really out of control. It's really gone. It's almost like we are in the twilight zone in American politics right now.
Well, I liken it more to the decadence of Imperial Rome when it was all starting to fall apart back then. And,
Correct.
Yes, a lot of it had to do with their using lead vessels for food and drink. We know what lead exposure does to the brain. But yeah, I mean, you had Caligula made his horse a member of the Senate. Things like that were going on. And it was... we're seeing excesses today, again, including the violence and the corruption and the general bad behavior. And part of the reason is because the politicians have succeeded in breaking free from the voters with all the election fraud. And I'm very disappointed in Donald Trump for shutting down his Election Integrity Commission and turning it over to the Department of Homeland Security, because I haven't seen the Department of Homeland Security do much more than walk around and say, oh, we're going to make sure the electronic voting machines are secure, which we already know they're not. The internal software is already set up to cheat.
Yeah, that's right, and I think it's on his behalf. I think that's some kind of either naivety or stupidity. I'm not sure which one to choose there, but it's silly. He should have secured that and made sure that there is no cheating, because these people, I realize now, there is no level. The blatant lies, and what's even worse, what I think is even more dangerous, is the stupidity of the lies. These people seems to be these people, they're not intelligent. If you look at their behavior, I mean, people keep seeing these people on the TV all the time, and they're probably assuming that these people are intelligent. I beg to differ. They're not, and their stupidity and their subterranean mindset is being exposed on a daily basis. How these people got there, I really don't know.
Well, they're unscrupulous, they're ruthless, they're sociopaths, they're very, very good liars, and they're willing to basically sell out the government and the American people to their financial backers. And so the Capitol building in Washington, D.C. is basically like a giant shopping mall for corporations to come on in and buy politicians.
Wow. Well, let's just hope the alligators and the crocodile get rid of each other, and or the hippos come and clear them out.
Well,
That's all I can say.
I have a different view. I think we're headed for a Soviet Union-style collapse, and what the American people need to be ready to do is stand up and say, we will decide what is going to be the next government of this country. And we go back to the Constitution, and the first 13 amendments, I think, would be a good start there. Anyway, Frank, thanks an awful lot, and we're going to switch over here to Drag in China. Aloha, Drag. Welcome to the show. What part of China are you in?
I am in Ningbo, Mike. How are you?
I'm doing fine here. The reason I was asking is my father was raised in Shanghai.
I am 3 hours south of Shanghai. It's where I stay when I'm here.
Okay.
But one of the things I want to talk about before we get started is, Mike, one of the things I've watched with President Trump is I don't think he is in control of the military. And if you watch him at his rallies and everything, he doesn't really talk about all of that. But we got Bolton, who has never met a war he didn't like. Pompeo, he's never met a war he didn't like. Kelly, another war hero, and Mad Dog Mattis. And I just really feel like that Trump is letting these guys run rampant, and I can't find anything to prove me wrong on that. What do you think about that?
I'm in agreement, and I don't think it's a question of, Trump is being controlled by the military so much as he's simply delegated the military policy of this country to the military, and he's just not all that involved. I'm sure he will get involved the first time there's a major setback, but that hasn't happened yet on Trump's watch. So we do know that Trump gave the orders for those cruise missile attacks on Syria following those 2 false flag chemical attacks. So he's exerting some control, but I think the nuts and bolts day-to-day running of the military, he doesn't want to get involved with that.
Well, I don't know. I just think that that's run amok right now, and that's just my opinion. But I wanted to throw that out before we got to China. And I listened to your show last night. You had a caller, I don't know him, talk about going to Walmart and buying from China, and that 7 cents goes to the company and 93 cents goes to China. And he may be right, but I don't think so.
No, he's overstating the situation.
But Mike,
just to clarify on that point, obviously Walmart gets their markup on the product, which is usually about 50% of the sticker price, if you will. Then, of course, the companies that are importing these products from China, they're making money on the deal as well. So it's a little, more balanced than he makes out, because those import companies are, for the most part, based here in the United States of America. But I do agree, importing so many products from China has harmed the U.S. Employment picture, and there should be efforts to try and turn it back. So far, Trump's tariffs do not seem to be doing that.
Mike, I think that Trump he's trying to do the right thing, but it's killing us. It's killing us. And so far since August 6th, when the tariffs went into place, I've had 2 containers come in, and it's cost me about $23,000. I'm a small company, and that doesn't help me. It doesn't help my customers. We just saw a post on what really happened last week over Ford has already paid over $1 billion.
Yep.
And where does that go, Mike? Where does that go?
It goes into the government's pockets.
Exactly. But
It's
who does
another
it go to
tax.
help? And that, well, the thing is that, you know, the caller yesterday really, he got my attention. And the Chinese people are very naive in many ways, but they're very loyal. They're very good people. But, Mike, one of the things, I was here in March, and I went to go look at an office to buy. I bought 2 apartments while I'm here, which I can't because I'm American. But anyway, you understand.
Yes.
But all of their banks are owned by the government. And all of the property is owned by the government. And they only deal in compound interest. That's it. They do not have any simple interest loans here. And one of the apartments that I purchased a year and a half ago, or a year ago, it has a 70-year, you can only own it for 70 years. And you can only own one of those. Second, there was a second apartment that was bought is a 40-year. And for example, a 70-year note, or not note, the note's only for 15 years. But with a 70-year ownership, you can send your kids to public school. You have a lot of benefit from that.
Mm-hmm.
40-year, you cannot send your kids to public school. You have to send them to private school. And that's the way it is. And I'm not trying to paint a bleak picture because it's not. The thing is that what really pisses me off is listening to all of these congressmen and everything else talk about how bad the people in China are treated. They need to come over to China because these people actually are treated very well. The problem we've run into is the tariffs came at the same time that you saw wages increasing beyond what the profitability of the company is. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So all of this crap that I'm listening to, and, you know, when Trump was talking about bringing everything back, you've known me a long time. I do casting, steel castings. And you can't get steel castings in America. You're not going to do it. There's no way. And if you did, you couldn't afford to pay for them. And so my point being is that, you know, China didn't do anything to the United States. The United States did what it did to itself with a bunch of greedy people at the top running our government.
Yes.
So that's my opinion.
I mean, it's a complex picture, and it's the greed of the politicians, the greed of the executives. It's also that following World War II, we literally had a corporate culture that was disconnected from the process of actually making the products through the invention of the MBA and scientific business management. And as a result, the executives grew up to be controllers of corporations who just said, we're just going to move the manufacturing someplace else because they'd never really been connected to the process of manufacturing or in the first place. So it's a complicated issue. And I remember back in the 1980s, people were sounding the alarm over the decline of American manufacturing. And common sense is going to tell you, you've got to have a product to sell if you're going to make money. Of course, Wall Street believes that if you just take a big pile of money and shake it side to side, it'll magically grow. But the U.S. government, instead of addressing that issue, invented what they called the service economy, which is that we were going to prosper the nation by doing each other's laundry for a fee. And that certainly created more tax opportunities for the U.S. government, but it didn't actually bring new revenue into our country. And that's when things began to decline and our standard of living began to decline.
Well, Mike, another thing that people need to understand is that, the Chinese don't eat rice every time you turn around. I mean, that's a bunch of crap.
Yeah, I know.
But if you look at what they've done to their infrastructure, within 2 blocks of me, they are putting in subway systems all over the place. They're what they call the fast train. It's a joy to be on, and we're trying to put one in Texas right now. We've been fighting about it for 20 years, and everyone's afraid of how loud it's going to be. Well, it's not. It goes by and makes a little noise, and off you go. And they have spent so much.
Hello?
And one of the things that you don't see in China is graffiti, for instance. And I asked one of the Chinese, I said, why don't you see graffiti here? And they said, well, the government asked them not to do that. So they don't do that. And they're not afraid of going to jail. That's a bunch of crap. So, Mike, it's just what I wanted to do was call and dispel a lot of the beliefs about what goes on. They're not locking everybody up. I'm not going to jump up and make a sign to denounce G, but at the same time, in many ways, they are so far ahead of the United States in their knowledge. And I'll talk to you more about it later. I'm working with one of the universities here. They hold 19 patents on a product globally that they have invented. We're not even close. Not even in the same ballpark.
Well, I've been looking at China's recent accomplishments in space. And, China's obviously the happening place in terms of not just the economy, but the sciences. I mean, I'd love to be able to visit China someday.
Yes.
Well,
the university I'm working with it's 7 colleges that are nothing but mining and construction, and they're so far ahead of anything that America has. And Mike, when I was at Texas A&M, we talk about the Chinese stealing from us, and one of my professors at Texas A&M went and pulled the German information because of so much of that information that came from Germany, and he pulled the synthetic oil, and he sold that to Mobil in the late 70s, which became Mobil One Oil. It made the university a lot of money. But yet we talk about how much the Chinese have stolen from us, or whoever else has stolen from us, and that's just a bunch of crap. So anyway, I'll give you another report as I go along. But Mike, what we're doing as a nation is the Chinese are going to resent us the way that a lot of other people around the world already do.
I would say that's probably already happening. Again, getting back to that story about Nikki Haley has basically isolated the United States. We have a very bad reputation right now. Nations are afraid of us. Our standing in the world is not good.
Well, 10 years ago, I looked like the animal in the zoo to these people. But now you're starting to feel the resentment that you see in Europe and South America and all the countries that I travel to. And it's just not a good feeling, Mike. And I don't really want our country to be who they perceive us to be, because that's not us. It's not you. It's not me.
Well, it is our
and
government and it is our
everything. So,
corporations, and I can imagine the tariffs are causing a lot of damage in China as they are here. Anyway, listen, Drag, I'm going to have to let you go. We got a bunch of
Yep,
callers
Mike.
waiting on the line.
I appreciate it. I'll keep you posted, and I'll keep you posted through next month.
All right, thanks an awful lot,
Have a good
and
one,
we
Mike.
look forward to that. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who rejoined our network a little while back. We're coming up on a commercial break, so I'm going to hold off taking more phone calls until after that. Now, Loretta Lynch is out there saying voter ID laws are meant to scare people away from the election process. That's how desperate they are to prevent a voter ID law. That's like saying driver's licenses are meant to scare people away from owning a car. That's how silly and desperate they're getting. We're going to take a break for commercials. We're going to be back with more phone calls after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to go right back to the phones now. Dustin in New Jersey, thank you for waiting patiently. What's on your mind today?
I have to appreciate that gentleman who called from China. He's absolutely, Mike, we keep saying China is the next empire. It's already there with the PPP in terms of per person parity, right? They have overtaken us economically as a superpower. And the problem is with American people, not all of them, but percentage, they just can't accept the fact that we're not on top anymore. You know what I mean? Like,
Yes.
our government, the economy is about power. If our economy slips, then our government's power slips. That's what it's about. So they got to demonize China. They got to demonize Russia. They got to demonize Iran. While at the same time, we're all buddy-buddy with Saudi Arabia and Israel and Britain and France, you know. But, you know, who's all buying the stuff from China? Britain, France, right? Everybody. You know,
Yes.
China's 85% of the world's manufacturing, and that's a fact.
Yes.
It's not going to change. It's not going to change at all, you know. So, and then, like he said, all the railroads over in China, they're all brand new. They're building railroads through Russia with the Silk Road. There's railroad projects going all over the place. They're in Africa. And what are we doing? We're building drone bases for crying out loud. I mean, it's a different mindset, Mike. I mean, we're trying to rule the world militarily, and they're going to do it economically. And they're winning economically, I can say. And economically, eventually will be militarily. Because what they say by 2030, they're going to be militarily more than we are in terms of them spending money, right? And people don't realize we spend a lot of money, goes to waste, but over there they're very frugal. You know, I mean, they can spend 1/100th of what we spend and get the same results. And you just got to look at the F-35 for that, you know, or the F-22.
Same thing with Russia, and the reason they can do that is that the vast majority of our huge Pentagon budget is being spent to maintain over 700 military bases around the world. And they all cost millions of dollars to operate. There's the salaries for the personnel on board. There's whatever weapon systems are deployed there, the care and maintenance of it, fuel, electricity, all of that. It's a huge, huge expense. And that's why Russia and China are able to build very capable modern weapons with much smaller military budgets than the United States. They don't have bases all over the world. They just want to take care of their own little country.
Exactly. I know. That's why I just get angry, because we did the same with the Japanese. We always demonize they're the enemy. It's happening with the Russians or Iranians, you know, the world's biggest state sponsor. Really? You know, I mean, come on. Everybody knows it's Saudi Arabia and Israel and our own government.
States.
That's the biggest state sponsor. Hey, Mike, I want to switch gears on talking about what Putin said about, you know, the Russians are going to go. He was basically saying, like, they're righteous. You know, like, they're not looking for a fight, basically, he's saying. If the fight comes to them, they will respond, and they're the ones going to go to heaven because they're righteous.
Yeah.
You know? I never heard him say, I mean, he really came out, I mean, I was like, whoa. You know, that's an eye-opener, you know.
It's a new Putin, and it's a much tougher Putin. And, yeah, he came out again the other day saying that Russia will not initiate a nuclear strike, but if Russia is hit with a nuclear weapon, they will respond. And that, I think, was a clear warning to the United States of America, because if you remember, a while back, Paul Craig Roberts came out and said that some of his friends inside Washington, D.C. were saying there were actually serious discussions going on about a preemptive nuclear attack against Russia.
And then I want to switch gears real quick about Israel having tanks on the border with Gaza. But, Mike, today is Friday the 12th, and still no airstrikes into Syria since the S-300. So that tells you something. How long has it been now?
It's
been going on almost going to be a month.
It's been a while, but Israel is flying their aircraft along the Syria-Lebanon border, which means they're trying to evaluate where those S-300s are and look for holes through which they can carry out an attack.
But the chutzpah of those people, what gives them the right to even fly into Lebanese airspace? The U.S., anybody, Britain, sending missiles over, Lebanon airspace. They're above the law. That's what it comes down to. They look at them as their side as the righteous ones.
Oh, yeah.
They're sick, though, Mike. I mean, they're definitely sick in Washington.
Israel collectively has this unshakable sense of, as you say, being above the law. The laws for everybody else, and Israel's going to do what Israel feels they need to do for their security, because poor little nuclear-armed Israel is constantly threatened by all these poorly armed Arab nations that surround it. Of course, once again, they're pounding on Gaza, which seems to happen regular as clockwork. Anyway, Dustin, we're going to let you go. We got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back with more phone calls. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to go right back to the phone lines to Al in Nevada. Aloha, Al. Thank you for waiting patiently. What's on your mind today?
Hello.
Hello.
Yes. You mentioned kratom some time back, and I thought I'd try it. And when I got some blood work back, I was shocked. My liver enzymes had gone off the chart. For instance, my alkaline phosphatase, which normally runs about 65 or so, was up over 500, and other markers the same. So I want to issue this word of warning to people who listen to you talk about kratom.
I will look into that. So far, this is the first time I've heard any kind of an adverse reaction. I imagine we're going to start seeing more of that, of course, because the pharmaceutical industries want kratom scheduled, so we have to go back to buy the stuff that they're making. And let's be honest here, this being an uncontrolled experiment, there might have been another reason for your liver activity. So we can't absolutely guarantee it's the kratom.
Well, I tell you what, I laid off of it, and next time, about 6 months later, it was back to normal. So
okay, well,
I think I've got it pretty well.
I'll look into it.
Okay, well, I thought I'd issue a word of warning.
All right, well, thanks an awful lot, Al. We're going to let you go there and switch over to Mo in Florida. Aloha, Mo. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael.
Aloha.
Hello?
Yes, you're on the air.
Yeah, Michael, I think this, I just got a gut feeling that this mob coming from the south up to our border in Mexico, I think what they're doing, I want to get your thoughts on this, but I think what they're trying to do is force some kind of, response from Trump and the military or whoever, and, some kind of a bloodbath, Kent State type thing, and then they can play this to their base. The Democrats can play this to their base, because it looks like this mob is overrunning, the checkpoints, and they're gaining speed. I obviously, everybody's pretty sure that George Soros types are behind it.
Through the border between Guatemala and Mexico, and there's an estimated 4,000 of them. Nobody's really sure, because they're kind of strung out along a very long distance on the road. But again, that may be one of the agendas at work here. The other agenda, of course, is forced blending of all the ethnic groups. The United Nations is insisting that the United States set up a migrant processing center and actually deal with this flood of Hondurans and others as are they legitimate asylum seekers, and if so, you have to let them in. But the system is definitely being gamed, and we're going to be talking about that a little later in today's show, or possibly on Monday, because we're coming up on the time when Claire comes in.
All right. Well, I just wanted to put that out there because you know how they are. They want to spark something, and blame Trump. Or I'm not a Trump fan any more than you are, lately. But I think they want some kind of a bloodbath. They want to, they want to spark this. They want to energize their base, the Democrats. Okay, Mike. Thank you.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go, and the phone lines are now clear. So let's get back to the news here. And Representative Meadows and Jordan are very angry with Rod Rosenstein. Apparently, he's due to testify next week, and he has made all of these demands a special format to testify on Capitol Hill. And apparently, House Judiciary Chairman Bob Goodlatte has basically acceded to Rosenstein, and it will be a closed-door transcribed interview. Rosenstein is demanding the interview be private and in a sensitive, compartmented information facility, like a Tempest vault, with multiple Republican lawmakers excluded. And right now, only the House Judiciary and Oversight chairs and ranking members will be present for the grilling. Only 4 people. Now, Democrats are literally on the edge of begging the Clintons to go away. And this article came out of the Daily Beast, and the article said, please get off the stage, make room for new blood, because she's damaged the brand. And of course, the Clintons are starting this 13-city live nation speaking tour, and the tickets are only $750 a piece. I'll bet the price will have dropped by the time they reach the second city. But yeah, Hillary is a problem. The fact that she's talking about running in 2020, a lot of people are concerned about that in both political parties. All right, we're going to take another phone call. Rick in Arizona, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
I like 3 quick things, Mike. Just, as far as Hillary running again, that's just the system making sure Trump stays president. Number 2, this caravan is a manufactured story. It's 1,700 miles from Honduras to El Paso, Texas. It's a long ways. And number 3, Eric Stryker, who is a alt-right commentator and writer, and he's really knows what he's talking about. He said that Barack Obama, the first 2 years of his presidency, has deported more people than Donald Trump. So I just wanted to throw that in there. Thanks for taking my call.
All right, well, thank you very much. And yeah, Trump has deported a lot of people. He hasn't deported enough. It's a drop in the bucket. It's like the job creation. We've created, 5,000 new jobs this month, and we have 1/3 of available Americans out of work. So it is an issue. All right, so we're going to let you go. Thank you for the phone call. Over in Portland, the mayor has basically proposed new measures where the police are going to keep protesters and counter-protesters apart, and anyone with a history of violence will be held in designated zones with enhanced police supervision. And this came from Mayor Ted Wheeler 2 days after leftist members of Antifa brawled with right-wing activism groups Proud Boys and Patriot Prayer, which saw the protesters beating each other, assaulting each other with pepper spray. Some injuries happened. So we're getting into this era of political violence, and it's being encouraged. Over at the University of Mississippi, there is this assistant professor of sociology, James Thomas, who literally tweeted out saying, you know, don't just harass conservatives in restaurants. You know, put your hands into their salads. Put your whole fingers in their salads. And an official for the University of Mississippi said, while we value free speech, obviously this requires an investigation. And they condemn statements that encourage acts of aggression. Now, Chris McDaniel, a Republican Mississippi State Senator and independent candidate for the Senate, called Thomas a low-life liberal. So it's getting testy out there. Nancy Pelosi has joined with Hillary Clinton, implying that if the Democrats don't get what they want, that there may be violence. She came out with a comment, there will be collateral damage to those who disagree with us. Now, interestingly enough, Nancy Pelosi got a taste of her own medicine. She was down at a restaurant in Miami and was accosted by a crowd of Cuban Americans who literally drove her out of that restaurant. So now, Nancy, you know how it feels. And apparently the issue with the Cuban Americans is that they feel the Democratic Party is focusing way too much attention on Mexican immigrants and ignoring the issues of Cuban Americans. So they're getting in her face here. Here's where it's getting dangerous, and I do not agree with this, but I'm going to report on that anyway. Former Montana Republican Party Chair Will Deschamps Sr. took to Facebook to encourage Trump supporters to bring firearms to the Trump rally in case the protesters show up. And asked to explain himself, he clarified he was worried about Antifa and continued to make comments saying, yeah, people have a right to defend themselves. Well, it's kind of a gray area. If everybody's carrying guns, or a number of people are carrying guns peacefully and not causing anything, it might deter Antifa from starting violence. But the possibility of somebody firing a shot to start a melee cannot be overlooked. One of our callers was talking about Kent State. That was actually triggered by an undercover FBI informant who fired a starter pistol. And at that point, the National Guard thought the student protesters were shooting at them. That's when they opened fire. So, the founder of #MeToo has now hit out against Hillary Clinton for claiming that Bill Clinton's affair with White House intern Monica Lewinsky was not an abuse of power. So Hillary's just getting it from all sides. And speaking of getting it from all sides, apparently Claire McCaskill she's in trouble because of the Project Veritas video clips of her campaign staff saying she's hiding her real views from the moderate voters. That her real views on immigration are hard left. She wants total gun control, and the Missouri media is just all over it. And of course, McCaskill is now screaming that Project Veritas be investigated because they did journalism, and we can't have that in this country. Now, over in Ohio, Democratic Senator Sherrod Brown has been hit with allegations of sexual assault. And they are much like the ones levied against Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh, dating back to the 1980s. And unlike Kavanaugh, the corporate media is totally silent. Not a mention of it. Because he's a Democrat. We don't talk about such things with the Democrats. It's only with the Republicans here. Okay, let's get into the economic news here. The stock market ended slightly in the green, but less in the green than when Friday began. So the trend was still down, but it didn't actually get into the red here. shale oil. It looks like their glory days may be over. And they caused a lot of damage with all this fracking, a lot of environmental damage. They ruined a lot of people's homes because the tap water now has methane coming up through it and you can set it on fire. And everybody went along with this fracking and shale oil boom because, oh, there's just tons and tons down there and we'll have oil forever. But it turns out there wasn't that much down there. And some wells in that Permian structure are already suffering from decline rates at above 15% after 5 years, much higher than the 5 to 10% originally anticipated. And this is according to R.T. Dukes, a director at industrial consultant Wood Mackenzie Limited. And he was telling Bloomberg, you have to grow activity year over year or it gets harder and harder to offset declines. So what he is saying is, in order to offset the declines from the existing fracking wells, which are worse than expected, the solution is to drill more fracking wells. Anyway. Very alarming story from Investment Watch blog. Current studies are showing that 90% of all Americans over 60 are forced to file for bankruptcy. So don't tell me this is a great economy. And of course, you know, rents have gone up, cost of food is going up. We're seeing cuts to pensions. Now they're talking cuts to Social Security. The old people are being thrown under a bus, and I say that collectively because Claire and I are over 60, both of us. And we can feel that as far as our current society is concerned, oh, they're old and used up. Who cares about them anymore? We've got wars to fight. Central banks are continuing to increase their gold reserves. They have now increased them tenfold over the last few years. So they definitely know something is going on. Russia and China are preparing to ditch the dollar for their national currencies in trade. And Russia and China are basically going to trade back and forth with each other in the ruble and in the yuan. And Putin is out there saying that it should not be interpreted as an attack on the United States dollar, but it's being done to ensure their security. And they're saying part of the reason they want to de-dollarize is the U.S. tendency to sanction nations that are dependent on the dollar. So the way to evade sanctions is not use the dollar. And he's absolutely right. And we're seeing more and more countries heading in that direction. There's going to come a point, you know, it's a little bit here and a little bit there and a little bit there, but there's going to come a point where everybody's going to say, okay, it's over, and they're all going to drop the dollar. Now, apparently, down in San Juan, Puerto Rico, the FBI raided government offices as part of an investigation into fraud and obstruction of justice charges. Apparently, an anonymous tipster called into the city controller's office about how the corrupt mayor's office awards government contracts, specifically a $4.7 million deal with construction company BR Solutions. So, even in Puerto Rico, they're dealing with that. Okay, we're coming up on a commercial break here. And when we come on back, we're going to be talking about this mob of Hondurans headed toward the U.S. border. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. So we've got this huge crowd, 4,000 plus, and they're still not really sure about the numbers. And apparently they succeeded in breaking through the barrier between Guatemala and Mexico. And if you've seen photographs of the way Mexico guards their borders, that is a serious, significant fence and gates. But when you have that many people tugging on the structure, eventually it gave way. And these migrants are demanding to be let into Mexico and ultimately through to the United States. They're shouting, we're not smugglers, we are immigrants. Well, we do have a legal immigration policy where you can apply for citizenship and go through the process. Only the Democrats, only the liberals think that you should be made a citizen and especially allowed to vote just by stepping over the border. Now, Donald Trump has threatened to cut aid to Honduras if their government does not cooperate in preventing this trip. Well, I would say in this case, the horse or the people are out of the barn. They're already up into Mexico here. But apparently the government of Mexico dispatched 2 727 Boeing planes filled with federal police officers to that southern border to try and intercept the caravan. Now, at one point, it was reported the caravan had turned back, but that turned out to be false. Apparently, they basically pulled back to rest for a while and give a chance for the stragglers to catch up. Then they surged forward again and into Mexico. So with that in mind, here's a story that came out of Judicial Watch. And apparently, according to Guatemala's president, nearly 100 ISIS terrorists have been apprehended in Guatemala. And obviously, if they join this mob and they're let into the United States, there could be some serious unpleasantness. Because ISIS right now is feeling very much betrayed by the United States government, which set them up and supplied them and has now turned on them. So this open border policy is a threat to our national security. And I think on that grounds that Donald Trump is fully justified in sending the military down there. Now, I don't think we're going to see this group voluntarily turn back. There's going to be a confrontation. And again, the issue is going to be, are they going to turn around and march all the way back to Honduras? I don't think so. They're either going to be in the United States or they're going to be in Mexico, and neither government really wants them. Okay, Immigration and Customs Enforcement has finally captured their most wanted fugitive. Jose Melchor Martinez, a.k.a. Jose Luis Martinez Sanchez, is a Mexican national in the country illegally multiple times. And, basically, he's a sex offender. All right, we're going to take a break for station identification. When we come on back, the lovely Lady Claire will be with us. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. And for those of you watching on YouTube, this gorgeous creature sitting next to me is the lovely Lady Claire, who likes to join us in hour number 3 every Friday with her unique perspective on the world. So what's your first story?
Well, my first source of irritation. NSA finalizes a $6.7 billion in classified tech contracts. And the details are not exactly out there for us normal mortals to look at. The contracts are called Greenway. And the people who got the grants, AT&T, General Dynamics, and Mantech International in 2016. And the question I have to ask is, when we've got infrastructure in this country corroding away, when we have our veterans sleeping rough in the streets, and everything is falling apart, the government decides, $6.7 billion is a reasonable price to pay for these contracts for all of the things that are falling apart. And the needs of the American people are not getting met. That really irritates me.
Well, we're in a wartime economy.
Yeah.
The government doesn't want to admit it. Corporate media doesn't want to admit it. But that is the ugly reality.
Yeah.
In wartime, all of the available money goes to the war machine, and everything else is left to basically rot away and decay. The general population is basically given just enough food to get by. And the idea is that after the war is over and we emerge victorious, that they'll go around cleaning things up and fixing things. But if we lose this war, obviously that's not going to be the case here.
No. We're going to be left with a whole lot of debt and nothing to show for it.
Right.
Yep. I'd like to talk about the current situation in Syria right now. Apparently, the Russian S-300 defensive systems have been upgraded. How they've been upgraded, we don't know. but just that they have. And it's 3 battalion sets of S-300 PM and 2 air defense missiles were handed over to Syria by Russia.
And I think that reads as the S-300 PM2 air defense missile.
All right. And it's equipped with a more advanced radar system, improved target illumination and guidance, which is firing radar, and a mobile command post. Now,
basically, this underscores what I said when we got that story about how U.S. and Israeli experts were up in Ukraine looking at their S-300 missiles.
Yeah.
And again, they're looking at the older version. They don't really know what Syria has.
Yeah, yeah. And only the specialists who can operate this system are in Russia, the report indicated. Iranians have never operated such systems because the S-300 MPU-2 supplied to Iran is, well, they call it an export version with a simplified circuit and control modes compared to what the Syrians have.
Well, I have two issues to raise with that. First of all, I wonder who put out the story that Iranians were manning these S-300 missile sites. And second of all, if the Iranians were trained on the export version and can't handle the version that's in Syria, then the version that's in Syria is the top line, not normally intended for export.
State of the art.
State of the art.
Yeah, yeah. And going on about this, I've heard stories, and I think you've mentioned stories also, that Israel is actually preparing to challenge the S-300 in Syria.
Well, yeah, we've been hearing that, and right now there are reports that Israeli warplanes are flying up and down the Lebanese-Syrian border, trying to pretend that this is not a violation of their sovereign airspace, because the Israeli warplanes are just paper thin, you know. They're just really narrow, and they just go right up that line on the map here. No doubt they're trying to probe the defenses, see where the radar systems are, and of course Syria can foil that because these are mobile systems. They can be moved very, very quickly to new locations. But I think that's what's going on right now. We do know that a U.S. drone was observed examining the S-300 sites from above. But again, this is a high-risk venture. Now, there is no question that the S-300 can shoot down the Israeli, or for that matter, the American F-15s and F-16s. The wild card here is the F-35. Is it really as stealthy as advertised? And here is where it gets high risk, because were Israel to go into Syria with the F-35 and have even just one of them successfully shot down, it's going to show the world the F-35 isn't that stealthy. It can be detected. And that, of course, is going to be a sales disaster for Lockheed Martin. And also a message to the rest of the world that much of America's modern high-tech weapons are a gigantic bluff. Now, Syria did, in fact, hit one of Israel's F-35s a while back.
I remember that,
Israel insisted that it was, I think they blamed it on an impact with a bird or something like that. But a few weeks ago, we had that other story where a Russian Sukhoi pilot achieved radar lock on an F-22.
Ooh, not good.
Not good at all.
Not good, yeah.
So they may have found a way around stealth. So if Israel goes into Syria with the F-35, there's a lot at stake.
Yeah, yeah. And apparently the Trump administration is going to be imposing sanctions on Russian and Iranian companies involved in the reconstruction of Syria. Mike, it gets more strange and more strange.
Well, no, because the United States wanted to do the reconstruction in Syria because then American companies get the money. That's the whole point of going into Syria. Smash it up and then sell them a new hospital, a new post office, a new whatever. And instead, Russia's going to get the back end deal.
Going back to U.S. politics and sort of focusing on the Middle East, there was an article in Zero Hedge. Bernie Sanders has heard enough. We cannot have an ally who murders a dissident in cold blood. You know, if it wasn't so painfully true that some of our BFFs, or rather, let me rephrase that, our administration's BFFs, are killers, you know, serial murderers who believe that, carpet bombing an entire country is absolutely wonderful. It's just the finest thing to do. And I find it terrifically ironic because not only is Saudi Arabia one of the most horrific disruptors of human life in that neck of the woods, let's talk about Israel, for heaven's sakes, who Bernie Sanders would never lay claim against, even though it is a known fact through Jewish organization, NGOs, and ours, that routinely Israel tortures even children. And they have something called indefinite detention, where if the kid goes in, they might not go out again until they're an adult.
I mean, if you think about it, everybody who's marching along that border fence between Gaza and Israel, carrying the Palestinian flag, is technically a dissident.
Yeah.
And Israel has been killing them by the hundreds.
Yeah. It's just so funny how people can consciously leave out some of the other big offenders in various regions.
Like I said at the top of the show, there's clearly an agenda here, and I think it is to force Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman out of the princeship, if you will, and replace him with somebody else. Certainly a lot of people in the Saudi royal family are very resentful from the way that he arrested all these very wealthy members of the family.
And shook him down.
It was an absolute shakedown. So they're angry about that. I'm pretty sure I recall that Mohammed bin Salman actually has an older brother who should have been next in line for the throne, but was passed over by King Solomon. He may be having a hand in this because there is so much media attention being put on this. There's an agenda behind it.
Oh, yeah.
There's
and
definitely an agenda.
Not a word from the prostitutes about Yemen. Not a single word.
Not a peep.
Where tens of thousands of people have been killed, they've been maimed for life, and the United States is complicit in these Saudi war crimes.
Oh, no question about it.
Just
like the United States is complicit in the Israeli war crimes.
Oh, of course.
I'm glad the International Criminal Court is finally standing up and saying, Israel, what you're doing, these are war crimes.
Hello, And it's very disheartening to me. As most of you know who read the blog or listen to our show, we're not the near side of 30 anymore. I'm pushing 70, and Mike will be a little bit in his mid-60s next year.
I'm already in my mid-60s.
But if
the high side of the mid-60s.
If there was a country that said, we've read your posts, come on down, we're going to accept you as citizens, and we don't do this stuff, Mike and I would be very sorely, I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but wouldn't you be very sorely tempted to take them up on an offer like that?
I would be.
Yeah. And the other thing about the hypocrisy on both sides of the aisle, apparently President Trump celebrated attacks on a journalist by praising the assault of a fellow Republican who body slammed a U.S. journalist last year. I mean, come on. Talk about
bad optics.
Values.
Bad optics.
We need to be against torture, against forcibly making someone do something that is not illegal.
Well, Trump has been flipping back and forth on this whole Khashoggi situation. At first he was out there saying, if Saudi Arabia did this, there'll be repercussions. Then he was out there saying, well, we're treating Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman like the Democrats treated Brett Kavanaugh, and he's actually accurate
very.
on that part of it. Now he's back to talking tough and saying, there are going to be consequences.
Well, the one person in this whole thing I have to praise is House Representative Tulsi Gabbard, who represents our state. And she has apparently been leading the charge among House Democrats that the U.S. needs to let go of this political alliance with Saudi Arabia, cease the multi-billion-dollar arms deals to the country, and shut off military support for the country's ongoing assault on Yemen. And the UN put the numbers earlier this week, 13 million people on the brink of famine in Yemen.
With all respect to Tulsi, that's not going to happen.
No.
Because if the United States broke off relations with Saudi Arabia, two things would happen. Saudi Arabia would immediately drop the petrodollar deal and start selling their oil for other currencies, and they would pivot and align with Iran. In fact, they already openly threatened that
they
if the
did.
U.S. hits them with sanctions over the Khashoggi affair, that they are going to basically reapproach Iran on a friendly basis rather than take part in the future U.S. war against Iran.
Right, right. Another thing in the Middle East, apparently Amnesty International, which is a pretty creditable human rights organization, at least as far as I can see, they are warning of a new zero-tolerance policy by Israel soldiers at the Gaza fence. And today, they talked about this, and it's raising fears of escalating bloodshed. In a statement, the human rights organization asked the Israeli government to rein in its armed forces, which have routinely already used unnecessary or excessive force during Gaza's weekly Great March of Return
Israel's
demonstrations.
not going to do that. In fact, Israel has started bombing Gaza, and they're using this one rocket attack, which actually did hit a house, causing some damage, no injuries, no deaths. But they've already bombed 20 targets inside Gaza.
Oh, man.
And, Netanyahu warned Hamas, stop the protesters or we're going to attack.
Yeah. But apparently Salah Higazi, who is Amnesty's deputy director for the Middle East and North Africa, said, given Israeli forces' horrific track record of using deadly force against Palestinian demonstrators in Gaza, as well as journalists, medics, and others, the announcement of a zero-tolerance policy is deeply alarming. And Higazi added that some people in the peace and human rights community are really concerned that this policy will further sanction the use of deadly force against unarmed protesters during today's demonstration, and that Israeli forces will be given carte blanche authorization to carry out large-scale genocides, escalating the bloodshed.
Yep.
And apparently, Israel has repeatedly used lethal force, unnecessary and excessively, against unarmed protesters in a shameless violation of international law. This is really insane. There are children in there. There are infants. There are toddlers being held onto by moms and dads and are not creating any kind of a problem, No,
they just want to have a life like anybody else.
Yeah.
Israel is basically trying to treat them so badly that they'll voluntarily go to the Palestinian refugee camps in places like Jordan, and Israel can take the Gaza Strip back, and along with all these other punitive actions like cutting off the flow of fuel into Gaza, Israel has now further reduced the fishing boundary off of the Gaza coast to just 3 miles.
And you can't find fish there. That's the problem.
You can't
There's
find
your
the
problem.
volume of fish there you need to do. And this, of course, resulted in a protest on the beach and more people getting injured and wounded by Israel.
Yeah.
But, I mean, this is a horrible way for anybody to treat anybody.
Yeah.
And it is a war crime. And I'm glad the International Criminal Court is making noises that they may take action.
Yes, me too.
And I can imagine there's going to be a huge amount of political pressure saying, no, Israel is above international law. You can't do that.
And always they play the victim card. We're the victim here. We're the victim. Who's got the weapons? IDF. Who's got maybe, some balloons and a placard? The Palestinians.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're trying to fight back with balloons and burning tires and rocks. And that's another material that Israel has now banned from entering Gaza is helium.
Yeah. But that's got medical uses, right?
It's necessary. It's used as an inert coolant gas in a lot of medical scanners.
I'm going to bop back to Europe, and this goes back to I can't make this stuff up. Sweden has declared a hand grenade amnesty in attempt to stop explosive gang violence. And on October 15th, Sweden began a temporary amnesty program for anyone in possession of hand grenades or other explosives, urging the public to hand over their illegal arsenals before the first part of next year. They think the bad guys are going to give up the hand grenades and explosive. Mike, what causes this kind of thinking?
Well, I imagine a certain degree of desperation.
Yeah.
They may be aiming at that part of the population which is associating with the criminals and just came into possession of one of these things. Every time they have a gun buyback or a gun amnesty program in this country, what they actually get are weapons that were already stolen from their rightful owners, or weapons that are simply non-functional.
Yeah. But I mean, I can't, it's hard for me to wrap my head around this as a reasonably logical lady. It just doesn't make any sense. And it would seem to me that Sweden is not looking at the root cause of the problem because they've chosen to become blind to it. Would you?
Yeah, well, basically, the problem is that with their open borders policies, a lot of these refugees that have come on in are members of international organized crime gangs. So the grenades and explosives are all about turf wars. Where this particular gang can operate, where that particular gang can operate. And it's so bad, there are now areas of Sweden, the police will not go anymore.
Because they become no-go zones because of the violence. One or two, Bob.
I just saw a lower third on Fox News that the Saudis have admitted that Khashoggi was killed in the consulate. They're saying they're making arrests of the people who did it. So they're going to blame this on the lower downs.
Okay.
Hopefully when they come back from the commercial break, we'll get some more details on that.
Okay. Alrighty. Yeah, that's a little strange, don't you think?
Yeah.
If they pin it on the lower downs, that means that none of the Royal House of Saud is going to have to plead.
The plan to get rid of the Crown Prince has failed. We have to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We have a caller on the line, Mateus in Canada. Aloha, Mateus. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Salutations to both of you.
Yep.
I can't hear him.
Hey, I have two things, kind of one for each of you. For starters, with more for Claire, because it's a bit of more philosophical or spiritual. What do you think of this idea that that this life is an opportunity for us to, like, really kind of deep down choose what kind of people we are, and that we have the freedom to do so by the choices that we make in our actions. And it's actually, I'm thinking it's actually like a creative process, kind of defining ourselves of if we're basically like good or bad or loving or hateful people. But you can't have creativity without freedom, and you can't have freedom without the freedom to make a bad decision. And so what do you think about that theory of why good and bad things happen in the world and bad things happen to good people? And
well, my thought would be, it's not what life throws at you. It's how you choose to respond rather than react. And I think that is a growth process, Mateus. And I think that we are all challenged every day to find that high road, even if it's not necessarily comfortable, and choose it. I really think that is my answer to that.
You also need to remember that good and evil are subjective terms. That different people have different ideas about things that are good and things that are bad. Conservatives think abortion is bad. Liberals think abortion is good. No man is a villain in their own eyes. And even these very corrupt politicians that we have running around the halls of Congress have convinced themselves that everything that they do is justified, it serves a higher and noble purpose, and that anybody who's criticizing them just has to be flat out wrong. The idea of a villain that goes around saying, I'm a villain and I'm evil, that's something that comes out of comic books and TV shows and movies.
Yeah, and there's a difference between a person's own opinion of themselves and a more fundamental reality check. Like, for example, if a person is fully willing to risk nuclear war, and that's obviously a bad idea, regardless of how that person views it themselves. From a larger perspective, that's just very selfish, very destructive, very insane. And so there is actually some things that really are intrinsically better than other things. Mm-hmm. And it's really it's kind of up for us to, we have this freedom to choose who we want to be. So all these villains that we see, these are the people that are using their free will and really digging a hole for themselves. And then people like you guys are, making your choices to, have a moral life and, really enriching yourselves inside. So, moving on to the other thing, back to reality more. I just wanted to make a comment about the Khashoggi.
Yes.
If that's how I pronounce it. Okay, so I just want to present an alternative idea, a quick argument of why it could have taken place in the consulate, why that would make sense.
The Saudis are now admitting it took place in the consulate.
I'm behind the ball here. Okay, I didn't know that.
This is just now breaking news. The Saudis are now admitting that, yes, this man was killed inside the consulate, and apparently they're arresting a bunch of lower-level people that they say were behind this. So the story.
Okay, well, I won't make you repeat it for everybody because
They're back to that. Remember when CNN's Jake Tapper teased the story that Saudi Arabia was going to admit that Khashoggi had died in the consulate during a botched interrogation? Apparently, that is what the official story is now going to be.
Right. Yeah, and I was just going to say that if you were going to commit a crime, would you rather commit it in a place where the police are allowed to go or a place where the police are not allowed to go? Just that one simple piece of logic right there, mixed with the hubris before the fall, mixed with the fact that he's committing war crimes in Yemen, mixed with the fact that, by the way, some sources are saying that he not only imprisoned his fellow princes and extorted money, but that he actually hung some of them upside down, beating them a bit. I don't know if that's true, but that would definitely back up your theory that there could be some revenge going on here.
Well,
and, just very last.
Go ahead.
Just a very last thing in Vancouver, Canada. Here, the Chinese got busted for buying votes, so they're paying you $20 if you vote for the China Party.
Whoa!
And I got more to say about Chinese some other time. Everyone's really soft and easygoing about the Chinese takeover. That's happening all over the world in many different levels. And, I'm definitely on the side of urging caution that, Canada is being purchased by Chinese, and we had a Chinese flag raising ceremony on the balcony of our city hall, and we had red Chinese scarves being worn by our own, Caucasian council members that were elected, wearing this red. So, okay, have a good weekend.
You
All
too,
right, thanks
Mateus.
an awful lot. We got to take another break for commercials, and we'll be back with more news. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to go back to the phones here to James in Ohio. Aloha, James. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi. I know several people, including myself, that have taken kratom for quite a while and have had liver function tests, and they're okay. So I'm sure there was another reason for the callers. I'm not trying to dismiss his information, but I do know several people, and it probably would have, if it was a problem, it would have become prominent news by now. They would have scheduled it most likely.
Oh, yeah, they would have definitely used it to demonize the product and scare people away from buying it. I did, during one of the commercial breaks, do a quick web search, and I wasn't able to find anything that definitively said that the use of kratom permanently damaged the liver. What I did find were articles saying that kratom, like everything else you ingest, is going to filter through the liver and may have short-term alterations to it. But that also includes all the prescription pharmaceuticals that you're taking as well. And if you listen to the people who are talking very rapidly at the end of those glitzy pharmaceutical commercials, a lot of them will say can damage your liver. So I don't know what this other individual's issue was, but I'm going to continue to research this. And everybody else there who is thinking about using this product, do your own homework on it as well. And I'll let you know what I find next week.
Okay. One more thing for Claire. I happen to be a Christian, and and talking with my friends who are not, and who are atheists, I explain it this way. The Bible was, when they criticize the Bible was written for a group of people who were at the end of the Iron Age, and they were farmers. If you start talking about genes and germs and outer space, and I think it would be too much future shock. In addition, I sent you a link to a biblical scholar who knows the ancient languages, and he addressed the oft-cited idea that the Bible has been corrupted and rewritten and all this. Well, he talks about the New Testament, and he uses an example. His name is Daniel Wallace, and he uses an example with slides that show that in ancient Greek, you can write John loves Mary over 1,000 different ways of scrambling the syntax, and as long as the thing at the end is right, then it all says John loves Mary. So there's no way, there's no way for the New Testament to be corrupted. The New Testament was written in ancient Greek. That's one thing he goes over. He goes over quite a bit of the differences in ancient manuscripts of the Bible. But I thought you would enjoy that information. Thank you for your time.
Well, thank you very much here. Basically, the books that originally became the New Testament were written, for the most part, in Aramaic, and then they were translated into Greek. And then when the Council of Nicaea sort of decided these books are the Bible and these others are not, it was retranslated again into Latin, because early Christianity was aimed at the Roman population who had the money to support a major church, hence the Roman Catholic Church. And there are some known corruptions in there. For example, the real name of the historical figure on which Jesus was based was Joshua, because if you take the Aramaic Yeshua directly into English, it's Joshua. But the name Jesus was an artifact that was created by first translating the Aramaic into Greek and then walking it into Latin. So it has been a game of gossip, and we know that in medieval times, churches were in fact changing the Bible to suit their own particular theology. That's why when Gutenberg came along with the printing press and ordinary people were finally able to read Bibles, and they were saying, well, look, this Bible here doesn't agree with that Bible over there, which ultimately led to the standardized King James Bible. But if you look today at how many different versions of the Bible there are out there now, in particular the Scofield Bible, which has that whole rapture thing in it, which didn't exist in those original texts.
No.
Right. I agree with you about the Scofield Bible, and it's been insinuated into seminaries everywhere, especially, strangely enough, the Baptists and the Pentecostals.
That would not surprise me.
That wouldn't surprise me.
Rothschild paid for him a Swiss villa to live in which to rewrite the Bible.
Yep.
Yeah.
You can read about it in the book Scofield and his amazing Bible. I think it was called. But that's all I have for you. Thanks.
All right, thanks an awful lot, James.
Yeah.
We're going to let you go and switch over to Mark in New York. Aloha, Mark. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. This is Mark. I just want to say thank you for having me on your show. Enjoying your show. It's been great. Very informative. But I thought with you and Claire on, I was following my Facebook page today, and I got a lot of memes and stuff from my liberal friends about Mitch McConnell and Republicans. And I was a little maybe you did talk in depth on it. I didn't get to hear the whole show. But I just wanted to see with you and Claire on there exactly what I should be looking for. When I searched, I saw all the Google, every liberal outlet seemed to be saying the same thing. Mitch is going to take your benefits away, Medicare and Social Security. And I didn't really see any kind of reply back from any kind of conservative outlet. except for Paul
you need
Ryan.
to understand right now that the corporate social media, Google, Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, they're filtering conservative content. So the liberals can sit out there and just tweet away all kinds of accusations, and you're not going to be allowed to see the responses that are coming back from conservatives. It is that blatant right now.
Yeah. And Mitch...
Even on DuckDuck, because I look at DuckDuck first, and it was really hard. I tried every type of query.
Yeah, DuckDuckGo is a good search engine. It's my favorite search engine as of right now. But we've been hearing from a lot of different voices in the government that they're going to have to cut Social Security and Medicare because they're just going to run out of money because the Social Security Trust Fund has been depleted. A lot of that money was basically, especially during the Clinton administration, grabbed and put into the General Revenue Fund to cover government spending. And the more our present administration is spending on war, the less they have to take care of the American people. As I said earlier in the show, we're living in a wartime economy. And the older people who are unable to carry a rifle and shoot who they're told to shoot just don't figure into that equation anymore.
We become collateral damage, if you will, to these wars.
Well, in the event of war, I'm a hostage.
But Mitch, one thing...
This is Mark.
Mark, I'm sorry. One thing I would suggest to you, take a look in terms of health and wellness and see what you might need more in terms of how you are eating, how you're feeding yourself, and what you are looking for is where the information converges. And that is probably going to be okay. The other thing that I would encourage people to do, and it's what I do when I find that a very dear friend of mine has some sort of terrible disease, and that is to seek a consultation at a hospital run by Seventh-day Adventists. And let me share why. Their numbers in terms of not having cancer, other deadly diseases, heart disease, are incredibly low. And it's because of how they eat. They're ovo-lacto-vegetarians. And I would encourage people who, even if the insurance does not pay, check with your local Adventist hospital and ask about a nutritional consultation, because it won't be just you. They treat hundreds of people within a month who may be dealing with illnesses which in some part, and I'm not an MD, but may in some part reduce their symptoms. I'm all up for arming yourself with information.
Yes.
Knowledge is power in this area.
And especially, you have to take responsibility for your own health.
Yeah.
Because our health industrial complex isn't interested in your health. They're interested in how much money they can suck out of your pockets by scaring you that you're on the verge of death. Or that you have some all these TV commercials, you know, there's a disease out there that you've never even heard of before, but by the end of the commercial, you're convinced you've got it.
Yeah.
My grandfather on my father's side was actually a hypochondriac.
I remember
and this was back when Reader's Digest was coming out with all these articles, I am Joe's, and one month it would be I am Joe's kidneys, I am Joe's lungs, I am Joe's hearts, and whatever disease Joe had that month, my grandfather was absolutely convinced he had it as well. Then Reader's Digest came out with I'm Jane's ovaries, and that was a really, really weird time for all of us.
Yes, but no, do arm yourself with information. And if you're shopping for a doctor, find one that is very pro complementary medicine, meaning they're talking about good, healthy stuff for you to eat and to avoid prefab food of any kind, because it's not good for you.
Yeah.
No, it isn't. And never, ever.
This summer, I was looking into it. I had the flu, and I'm familiar with like juicing and stuff. I had Lyme disease, so I had to like educate myself a little bit because it did affect my liver.
Yeah.
Taking all the stuff. So I found even Kindle books for a couple of bucks. They had some great suggestions on taking care of my body.
Yeah.
And stuff. So I do juice a little bit more, banana, apple, some veggies. So I'm a little bit aware of it, and it does help. My biggest thing was using a food scale, just so I'm not putting too much in my mouth.
Yeah, that can help too.
You know, I wonder if I could switch real quick.
Well, before you do, I have one more piece of advice for you, and that's never use a doctor whose office plants are dead.
Bad sign. Bad sign.
That's great. You know, I could say around here in New York, I found these urgent care places. So even in a rock and a hard place, the worst I had was the flu, get a blood test, which is important. I listened to Brian Tracy and stuff, and he was like, you want to take care of yourself? Make sure you brush your teeth, take care of that, and get a blood test once a year to find out the cholesterol and stuff. But, you know, another thing, I've been going back and forth. It's really heating up with my social media stuff. And another thing I thought of was trusting the government with your money as compared to the corporations. And I put out the question nobody wanted to ask was like, who do you trust more, the corporations or the government? And who in proportion is more corrupt? Like, I looked at the Fortune 500, tried to use that and say, okay, let's look at how many people there are corrupt as opposed to how many people in the government. To me, I was thinking that, you know, there's a lot more corruption in government with the cronyism. When they complained about capitalism is evil, I said, I think you'd mean that crony capitalism is evil. I was just thinking about what should I be searching for my arguments in social media about how to look about am I chasing up the wrong tree with the proportionality of how many, because there are thousands of people internationally.
I would say that probably government and corporations are equally corrupt. And it's rather pointless to try and say that this group is more corrupt than that group. The problem is they are all corrupt.
Okay. They're all in bed with each other, figuratively.
Our nation has been hijacked by this very corrupted outlaw criminal gang. I mean, we can see today the Democrats blatantly ignore the laws on immigration and voting, and they're absolutely they're operating as a criminal enterprise.
Yeah, the
Republicans have their hands out too, but I'm just still thinking I've worked in corporations where I was doing must be people cogs in the wheel like me, you know, that are making an honest living, and there's only one guy at the top that's ruining it for thousands of employees. You know, that's why
I think that both in government and the corporations, the higher up you move in the structure, the more corrupt it becomes, and either you are equally corrupt or you're not allowed to move any higher.
What was that famous line from The Godfather?
From I think it was Godfather 3. I've been trying to, tried to go straight, but the higher I go, the crookeder it gets.
Yeah, exactly. There you go.
I mean, look like what we're finding out now about the Pope and the Catholic Church, and I'm glad that Pennsylvania is finally launching a criminal investigation.
Getting nuts. You know, everything. It's just every day there's something new.
Yeah.
Like even you have a hard time keeping up with it.
Yes.
Yes. We sort of have to sprint to do that intellectually.
Yes. But you're saying, like, when the quote that I saw today that was getting me, said Reagan, they were quoting Mitch saying that everything is due, all these taxes are due to these entitlements. And then the guy sent me this thing about Reagan said that it has nothing to do with entitlements, the taxing. And that made sense to me because we're getting taxed and it's supposed to be put in the fund. And I came back with, well, Mitch is saying that now it is with all the extra stuff like welfare and food stamps.
The handouts to the illegal immigrants, the handouts to the refugees. I mean,
I didn't want to get into that. I wanted to say that, but instead does that make sense? That was Reagan saying something different that, I don't know. I don't mean to put you on the spot with that without seeing this ridiculous meme going on.
I would want to see the quote in context because the entitlements have always been an issue, but then politicians campaign on entitlements. Vote for me and I will get you this child care credit. Vote for me and I will get you free abortions. Vote for me and I will get you, free this and free that. And over time, it does create a system in which a huge amount of the tax revenues are taken up by the entitlements, but it isn't the lion's share. The lion's share of our tax money is going to that war machine. It's going to pay the interest on the national debt and to Israel. Anyway, Mark, we got to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials.
All right, take care.
We're going to close the phone lines. We'll be back with the last segment of our program after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And apparently the final story coming out of Saudi Arabia is that Khashoggi did die inside the consulate in Istanbul. They're now saying that he got into a fight with the intelligence assets who were trying to interrogate him and was accidentally killed. And that apparently is going to be the story. Turkey was making some other outlandish claims here. Apparently, the White House is about to make a statement of response. And after all this talk about there's going to be consequences, there's going to be sanctions. Saudi Arabia is now saying that it took them a while to find the truth, but they're making arrests among the people who committed this crime, and they're vowing an overhaul of their intelligence services. So. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So they're going to dump this on the lower decks, and that part of it might be true. That it was an interrogation that got out of hand. Khashoggi fought back and died, because it doesn't make sense they would actually kill the guy in the consulate.
No, that would be a big tacky hairy no-no.
But there's also no doubt that this death. Pardon me, I have the hiccups again. There's absolutely no doubt that this incident was being exploited for political gain by all kinds of people.
Yeah.
And so we'll see what's going to go on with there. You have a story that everybody needs to hear.
Okay. There has been a recent study that 90% of table salt does contain microplastics. And they were studying sea, rock, and lake salts. And 90% of them, salt brands sold around the world, contain microplastics. Now, that's a very disconcerting thought.
That is not a good thing at all.
And if nothing else that we've said motivates you to perhaps go to a health food store and say, what about your salt? How can you tell me that it doesn't have microplastics in it? Where does it come from? And you have to source it and bring home something that's a little safer and easier for you and your family to digest, because human beings do not have a capability of really digesting plastic. Well, at least I don't think so.
No, we don't.
Yeah.
And it's capable of basically eroding the gut. And as I understand it, the problem is primarily with sea salt, which is basically evaporated seawater. And as you know, there's a tremendous amount of plastic pollution in the ocean.
Yeah, it's grim out there.
And apparently this is where it's all coming from. Apparently mined rock salt does not have this problem. So that's going to be a big boost to the salt mine industry.
Yes, definitely.
And but yeah, I mean, that is really very serious.
And the report came out of researchers in South Korea and at Greenpeace East Asia. And they tested 39 salt brands that are sold around the world, and 36 of them contained microplastics.
All right, well, there's the music. It's time for us to get on out of here on this Pauhana Friday. Please stay tuned for John Stadmiller. I'm sure he's got lots of interesting things to share with you. Please take what you learn here, share it with everybody that you know. Please keep reminding everybody that the corporate social media is engaging in a massive anti-conservative censorship campaign. Please donate to Republic Broadcasting. Please donate to whatreallyhappened.com. Thanks to everybody who already did. We'll be back on Monday. Aloha, America.